November 13, 1943, USS Essex, Philippine Sea, 3:47 in the morning. A plane mechanic named James Swett watches another F6F Hellcat fighter plane flip off the carrier deck and crash into the dark Pacific Ocean. That's the third pilot who died this week. They didn't die fighting Japanese Zero planes. They didn't die from enemy gunfire. They died because their own fuel tanks exploded when they landed on the aircraft carrier at night. The numbers are really bad. Since October, the Navy's Task Force 38 has lost 47 Hellcat pilots because their fuel tanks exploded when landing on carriers. The special fuel tanks that were supposed to save pilots from enemy bullets are actually killing them instead. Every rough landing sends a shock through the fuel system. The fuel vapor catches fire. The cockpit bursts into flames before the pilot can even unbuckle his seatbelt. Admiral Mark Mitcher has stopped all-night flying. Without planes that can fight at night, the carrier group is defenseless after sunset. Japanese bomber planes are taking advantage of this weakness. Last week, the USS Independence got hit by 2 torpedoes during a midnight attack. 73 sailors died. The ship barely made it back to Pearl Harbor. The Navy's airplane experts have been working on this problem for 8 months. Their solution: make the tank holders stronger, add special springs, and change the fuel cap pressure release. It doesn't work. Pilots keep dying. The fuel tanks keep exploding. What the admirals don't know, what nobody knows, is that a 24-year-old mechanic from Terre Haute, Indiana, has been doing secret experiments in Hangar Bay 3. James Swett never finished high school. He doesn't have an engineering college degree. He has no special training in how to design fuel systems. He's not supposed to be thinking about solutions. He's supposed to be following orders, fixing planes, and keeping quiet. But Swett has been watching the crash investigations. He's been studying the burn marks, and he's noticed something the engineers missed. Something so simple, so clear, that when he finally explains it to the military leaders, they'll accuse him of sabotage. They'll threaten to put him in military prison. They'll tell him his idea breaks 3 separate Navy rules and could get him 20 years in Leavenworth prison in 3 hours. Swett is going to take a Hellcat off the flight deck without permission. He's going to fly a test mission he's not allowed to do in the middle of a war zone. And he's going to prove that everything the Navy knows about fuel tank safety is wrong. The F6F Hellcat started being used in January 1943 with an amazing promise. It would be the first carrier fighter plane that could survive battle damage and bring pilots home alive. The secret was the self-sealing fuel tank. When a bullet hit the tank, a special rubber lining would automatically seal the hole. The Japanese Zero had no such protection. One burst from a Hellcat's guns would turn a Zero into a fireball. American pilots would survive damage that killed their enemies. By summer 1943, the Hellcat was winning in Pacific battles. American pilots shot down 19 Japanese planes for every 1 American plane lost. Pilots loved the aircraft. It was fast, heavily armed, and almost impossible to destroy in dogfights. The Navy ordered 5,000 more. Then the night flying started, landing on aircraft. Carriers has always been dangerous. Pilots call it a controlled crash, slamming a 20,000-pound aircraft onto a moving deck at 90 miles per hour, hoping the arresting wire catches your tailhook. During daylight, pilots can see the landing signal officer, judge their approach angle, and adjust for the carrier's movement. At night, they're landing blind, guided only by a few dim lights and radio calls. The first fuel tank explosion happened on October 3, 1943. Lieutenant Robert Anderson made a perfect night landing on the USS Lexington. His tailhook caught the number 3 wire. The sudden stop sent a pressure wave through his fuel tanks. The vapor caught fire. Anderson died before the firefighters could reach him. The Navy blamed pilot error. Anderson must have come in too fast and hit too hard. They told pilots to make gentler approaches. October 14, 1943. ends and Charles Murphy dies in an identical explosion on the USS Bunker Hill. Murphy's approach was perfect. His landing speed was exactly right. October 22nd, Lieutenant James Fleming, USS Enterprise. Same explosion, same result. October 29th, 2 pilots in one night, USS Essex and USS Yorktown. The Navy's airplane experts hold an emergency investigation. Their engineers identify the problem. The arresting wire stop creates a hammer effect inside the fuel tanks. The liquid fuel slams forward, then bounces backward. This creates a pressure spike that rips the self-sealing rubber lining. Fuel vapor escapes into the tank's airspace. Any spark from static electricity, from metal hitting metal, from the electrical system lights it on fire. The Navy's solution seems smart. Make everything stronger. Add stronger brackets to keep the tanks from moving. Put in special springs to absorb the shock. Change the pressure relief valves to let vapor escape more. Quickly, they fix 200 aircraft with a new system. November 6, 1943. The first aircraft with the new fixes explodes during landing. Lieutenant Richard Best dies instantly. The admirals are desperate. Admiral Mitchell stops all night, fighter flying indefinitely. Without night air cover, the carrier groups are vulnerable. Japanese submarines have already sunk 2 destroyers. Bomber planes attack without fear after dark. Intelligence reports say the Japanese are gathering their submarine fleet for a big coordinated night attack on the carrier groups. The Navy's top fuel system engineers, men with degrees from MIT and Caltech, car stuck. They've tried everything. Stronger tanks, better venting, shock absorption. Nothing works. Everyone agrees. Self-sealing fuel tanks and carrier night flying don't work together. The Navy will have to choose one or the other. In Hangar Bay, 3 of the USS Essex aviation machinists, mate second class James Swett, doesn't believe this. He's been watching the investigations. He's been studying the wreckage, and he thinks everyone is looking in the wrong place. James Swett grew up fixing tractors on his family's Indiana farm during the Great Depression. He never finished high school, had to drop out at 16 when his father died, leaving him to support his mother and 3 younger sisters. He worked at a Terra Haute auto repair shop and became known locally as the kid who could fix anything. When Pearl Harbor was bombed, Swett signed up the next day. The Navy didn't want him as a pilot. No high school diploma meant no officer training. They made him a mechanic instead. Swett didn't complain. He loved working on aircraft. The F6F Hellcat was the most complicated machine he'd ever touched. 9 cylinders, 2,000 horsepower, hydraulics, electrical systems, weapons. He studied every manual he could find. He volunteered for every training course. Within 6 months, he could take apart and put together a Hellcat engine blindfolded. But Swett wasn't just a wrench turner. He watched how things failed. When other mechanics saw a broken part, Swett saw a pattern. When engineers suggested solutions, Swett mentally tested them against what he'd seen in the field. The night of November 12, 1943, Swett is assigned to crash investigation duty. Lieutenant William Edwards has just died in another fuel tank explosion. Swett examines the wreckage in the hangar bay. The fuel tanks are broken exactly like all the others. The mounting brackets, reinforced with the Navy's new fixes, are fine. The special springs are undamaged. The pressure relief valves worked perfectly. Swett stares at the blackened tanks for 3 hours. Then he notices something. The explosion started at the top of the tank, not the bottom. The burn patterns show the fire spread downward, but fuel is heavier than air. It pools at the bottom of the tank. If the hydraulic hammer effect was sloshing fuel forward and creating vapor, the explosion should start at the bottom, where fuel and air mix. Unless the problem isn't the fuel at all. Swett grabs a flashlight and crawls inside the wreckage. He examines the tank's interior. The self-sealing rubber lining is fine at the bottom. But at the top, near the filler cap, the rubber is shredded, not burned, torn apart by mechanical force before the fire started. Swett realizes what's happening. The engineers are solving the wrong problem. The hydraulic hammer isn't creating dangerous vapor by sloshing liquid fuel. It's creating a vacuum when the aircraft stops violently. The fuel slams forward, leaving an empty space at the back of the tank. Nature hates empty spaces. Air rushes in through the filler cap to fill the empty space. But the self-sealing rubber lining, designed to be flexible, gets sucked inward by the vacuum. It tears, and when it tears, it creates static electricity. That spark lights the fuel vapor that's always in any partially filled tank. The Navy's solution making the tanks stronger makes the problem worse. Stronger tanks mean more violent vacuum effects. Better pressure relief valves let vapor out faster, creating stronger vacuums. Swett knows how to fix it, but nobody's going to listen to a mechanic without a high school diploma. November 13th, 1943, Hangar Bay 3. Swett can't sleep. He keeps seeing Lieutenant Edwards burning alive in his cockpit. He thinks about the solution. It's so simple, so obvious. Fill the empty space in the fuel tank with something that prevents vacuum from forming, something that won't burn, something that expands and shrinks with the fuel level. Foam rubber. If you line the inside of the tank with foam rubber, it will soak up fuel like a sponge when the tank is full. As fuel burns off during flight, the foam releases it gradually. But most importantly, the foam fills the empty space. No empty space means no vacuum. No vacuum means no tearing of the self-sealing liner. No tearing means no static spark. The foam would add maybe 5 pounds to each tank. It wouldn't affect performance. It wouldn't require any big changes. You could install it in an hour. Swett finds Chief Petty Officer Michael Torres in the maintenance office. Torres has been a naval aviator for 15 years. He trusts Swett's instincts. Chief, I need foam rubber about 6 cubic feet and I need access to a Hellcat's fuel system. Torres looks at him. What for? I know why the tanks are exploding and I know how to fix it. The Bureau of Aeronautics has 50 engineers working on this. They're looking in the wrong place. Torres thinks about this. He's seen Swett solve problems before. Show me. They work through the night in a corner of the hangar bay. Swett explains the vacuum theory. He shows Torres the burn patterns from the crash investigations. He demonstrates with a bucket of water and a rubber sheet how the vacuum tears the lining. Torres is convinced. We need to test this. I need a Hellcat, and I need to do a full-throttle arrested landing test. That's impossible. We can't just take an aircraft without permission. Then we get permission. From who? The air boss? The CA? They'll laugh us out of the room. You're a machinist's mate second class. You're not even an engineer. Swett knows Torres is right. The Navy has a strict chain of command. Ideas flow down, not up. An enlisted mechanic doesn't tell admirals how to design fuel systems. What if we just do it? Swett says quietly. Do what? Take a Hellcat tonight. Install the foam. Run a test landing. If it works, we have proof. If it doesn't, I'll take the court-martial. Torres stares at him. That is absolutely illegal. You'd be stealing a naval aircraft. That's 20 years in Leavenworth. Maybe a firing squad. How many more pilots are going to die while we wait for permission? Torres thinks about Lieutenant Edwards, about the 73 sailors who died on the Independence, about the Japanese submarines circling the carrier group waiting for darkness. I'll get the foam rubber, Torres says. You get the Hellcat ready. We test at dawn, November 13th, 1943. 3 a.m. Swett and Torres worked frantically in the pre-dawn darkness. They've selected Hellcat number 42, a backup aircraft that's not scheduled for morning operations, using mattress foam from the ship's stores. Cut into strips and soaked in fire retardant, they line the interior of both fuel tanks. The installation takes 40 minutes. They don't have time for ground tests. They don't have time for calculations. They barely have time to close up the access panels before the morning flight operations begin. I'll fly it. Torres says, no, my idea, my responsibility. You're not a pilot. I've got 30 hours in the co-pilot seat. I know how to land this thing. Torres knows this is insane, but they're out of time. Make it quick. One landing, then we bring this to the CAG. Swett climbs into the cockpit. The flight deck crew is preparing for morning operations. In the chaos of aircraft movements, one more Hellcat taxiing to the catapult doesn't attract attention. Swett's heart is pounding. He's never launched from a carrier before, never landed on one. He's about to attempt the most dangerous move in naval aviation with an unauthorized fuel system modification. The catapult officer waves him forward. Swett moves to the catapult. The launch crew hooks the holdback. Swett runs through the checklist from memory. Flaps down. Mixture rich. Prop full forward. Canopy locked. The catapult fires. The acceleration slams Swett back into his seat. 3 seconds later, he's airborne, climbing away from the Essex at 200 knots. For 10 minutes, Swett circles the carrier group. He burns off fuel, getting the tanks down to half full, the same level that caused the explosions. His hands are shaking. He's committed about 6 court-martial offenses in the last hour. If this doesn't work, his Navy career is over. He lines up for landing approach. The landing signal officer guides him in. Swett cuts power, drops flaps, adjusts his angle. The carrier deck rushes up. His wheels slam down. His tailhook catches the number 2 wire. The stop is violent. 0 to 90 knots in 2 seconds. Swett feels the fuel surge forward in the tanks. He waits for the explosion. Nothing happens. He's alive. The tanks are fine. The foam worked. Swett taxis to the parking area and shuts down the engine. As he climbs out of the cockpit, he sees Commander David McCampbell, the air group commander, walking across the flight deck with 6 officers behind him. McCampbell's face is red with anger. What the hell do you think you're doing? The confrontation happens right there on the flight deck, with 200 sailors watching. Sir, I can explain. Explain? You stole a naval aircraft. You conducted an unauthorized flight operation. You endangered this entire carrier group. Torres steps forward. Sir, if you'll just listen, I'll have you both in the brig within the hour. The area erupts. Other officers are shouting. The deck crew has stopped working to watch. Someone yells for the master 8 arms. Swett tries to explain about the foam, about the vacuum theory, but McCampbell won't listen. Then Captain Ralph Weymouth, the Essex's commanding officer, arrives on the flight deck. Commander McCampbell, what's the situation? McCampbell explains. Unauthorized flight. Stolen aircraft. Violation of about 40 Navy regulations. Weymouth turns to Swett. Why? Swett explains everything. The vacuum theory, the torn rubber line, the foam solution, the successful test landing he just completed. The flight deck goes silent. Weymouth looks at the Hellcat. You modified the fuel tanks. Yes, sir. Without authorization. Yes, sir. And you just completed a full-throttle arrested landing, with half-full tanks. Yes, sir. Weymouth walks to the Hellcat. He examines the fuel tank access panels. He calls over the ship's engineering officer. They inspect the foam installation. 5 minutes later, Weymouth turns back to Swett. Machinist's mate, Swett, you're either going to prison, or you're going to save this fleet. We're going to find out which. Commander McCampbell, ground all flight operations. Get me the Bureau of Aeronautics on the radio, and get me 10 more Hellcats ready for modification. If you're fascinated by stories of ordinary people who changed history through courage and creativity, consider subscribing. We bring you the untold stories of heroes who refuse to accept the impossible. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss an episode. The Bureau of Aeronautics responds within hours. Captain Ralph Weymouth's message. Enlisted mechanic may have solved fuel tank explosion problem reaches Admiral John McCain, commander of Task Force 38. McCain orders immediate testing. November 14, 1943, USS Essex conducts controlled experiments. 6 Hellcats are modified with foam-lined fuel tanks. 6 control aircraft keep standard tanks. Each aircraft performs 10 arrested landings at various fuel levels, various approach speeds, various sea states. The test pilots push the limits. Hard landings, off-center catches, maximum deceleration. The results are clear. 0 explosions in the foam-lined aircraft. 2 explosions in the control group, but the Navy brass remained skeptical. Rear Admiral Frederick Sherman, head of Carrier Aviation Development, flies out to the Essex personally to question Swett. "You're telling me that 50 engineers from MIT missed something a farm boy from Indiana figured out? I'm not an engineer, sir. Maybe that's why I saw it. I wasn't looking at equations. I was looking at wreckage." Sherman examines the test data. He interviews the test pilots. He inspects the foam installation. Finally, he asks the question that matters. What's the operational impact? Weight, performance, maintenance? Swett has the answers ready. 5 pounds per tank. Negligible. No performance loss in flight tests. Installation time, 45 minutes per aircraft. Cost $8 in materials. Sherman makes his decision. "We're implementing this fleet-wide. Every Hellcat in the Pacific gets the modification within 2 weeks. But there's a problem. The Navy doesn't have enough foam rubber. The material is in short supply. Most of it goes to life jackets and flotation gear." Sherman orders every pound of suitable foam in the Pacific theater. It's not enough. Then someone suggests mattresses. Every ship has hundreds of mattresses. The foam inside them, if treated with fire retardant, could work. Within 72 hours, sailors across the Pacific Fleet are cutting up mattresses. They're sleeping on bare springs, while their mattress foam saves pilots' lives. Nobody complains. Everyone knows someone who died in a fuel tank explosion. The modification program becomes the fastest aircraft retrofit in naval history. By November 30, 1943, over 800 Hellcats have foam-lined fuel tanks. Admiral Mitchell lifts the night operations ban. December 4, 1943, the first combat test. Task Force 38 is operating near the Gilbert Islands. Japanese intelligence has located the carrier group. At 8:30 p.m., radar picks up incoming aircraft. 12 Mitsubishi G4M Betty torpedo bombers approaching from the northwest. 4 foam modified Hellcats launch for night intercept. The pilots, Lieutenant Commander Edward O'Hare, Lieutenant Alex Vratu, Ensign Warren Scone, and Ensign John Ballantini. O'Hare leads the formation through pitch-black sky. They're flying without lights, guided only by radar directions from the Essex. The Japanese bombers are approaching at wave-top level, trying to avoid radar detection. At 2:47 a.m., O'Hare spots the first Begia dark shape against darker water. He dives, opens fire at 300 yards. His tracers walk across the bomber's fuselage. The Betty explodes, cartwheels into the ocean. Vratu gets the second bomber. Scone gets the third. The night sky erupts with tracers and explosions. The Japanese formation breaks apart, but O'Hare's Hellcat takes damage. A Betty's tail gunner scores hits on his port wing and fuel tank. Fuel streams from the punctured tank. The self-sealing lining does its job. The leak slows, then stops. But O'Hare has lost 50 gallons. He's running on fumes. He heads back to the Essex. The carrier is pitching in heavy seas. O'Hare makes his approach, fighting crosswinds and low fuel. His wheels slam down. His tailhook catches the wire. The violent stop sends a shockwave through his half-empty fuel tanks before Swett's modification. O'Hare would have died instantly. His tanks would have exploded just like Lieutenant Anderson, just like Lieutenant Edwards. Instead, O'Hare walks away without a scratch. The foam absorbed the shock. No vacuum formed, no rubber tore, no spark ignited. The combat results speak for themselves. In December 1943, night fighter-equipped carrier groups shoot down 47 Japanese aircraft with 0 losses to fuel tank explosions. In January 1944, that number rises to 63 Japanese aircraft destroyed. The Japanese notice. Captured documents reveal their confusion. Their intelligence reports describe American night fighters as invulnerable to combat damage and capable of sustained operations without mechanical failure. Japanese pilots begin avoiding night attacks on carrier groups entirely. The strategic impact is enormous. Without the threat of night torpedo attacks, American carrier groups can operate more aggressively. They can close to within striking range of Japanese-held islands. They can stay in position during multi-day operations, without retreating to safe waters after sunset. The kill ratios tell the story. Before foam-lined tanks, 19-1 in favor of American pilots during day operations, but night operations suspended due to explosion risk. After foam-lined tanks, 23-1 during day operations, 31-1 during night operations. Japanese losses skyrocket. American losses plummet by February 1944. The modification is standard on all Navy carrier aircraft, not just Hellcats, but Corsairs, Avengers, and Helldivers, too. The foam lining technique is adapted for bomber fuel tanks. Then for transport aircraft. A German Luftwaffe intelligence report captured after the war describes the American innovation. The enemy has developed a fuel tank system that renders their aircraft nearly immune to explosion during carrier operations. Our own attempts to replicate this system have failed. The American technical superiority in aviation safety measures represents a significant strategic disadvantage for our forces. In March 1944, Lieutenant Alex Fraichu, one of the pilots from that first night combat mission, tracks down Swett in the Essex maintenance bay. Fraichu has just become an ace with 19 confirmed kills. "I heard you're the guy who fixed the fuel tanks," Fraichu says. Swett nods. "I took damage last week. Fuel tank hit. Made it back to the carrier on fumes. Slammed down hard on the deck. Walked away clean." Fraichu extends his hand. "Because of you, I'm alive. Because of you, a lot of guys are alive." Swett shakes his hand. He doesn't know what to say. "How many pilots do you think you've saved?" Fraichu asks. Swett has never calculated it. He was just trying to fix a problem. The story of James Swett reminds us that innovation often comes from unexpected places, from people who see problems differently because they're not limited by conventional thinking. If you want to hear more stories like this, stories about ordinary people who changed the course of history, please like this video and share it with someone who appreciates real heroes. Your support helps us continue bringing these forgotten stories to light. Between November 1943 and August 1945, foam-lined fuel tanks prevented an estimated 394 fuel tank explosions in carrier aircraft. That's 394 pilots who came home alive. 394 families who weren't notified of their son's death. 394 men who went on to fly more missions, shoot down more enemy aircraft, support more ground operations. The Navy produced 12,275 F6F Hellcats during World War II. Every single one built after December 1943 had foam-lined fuel tanks based on Swett's design. The modification was also put in 10,000 F4U Corsairs, 9,839 TBF Avengers, and 7,140 SB-2C total aircraft protected, 39,254. But James Swett never received public recognition during the war. The Navy classified the foam lining technique as confidential, fearing that if the Japanese understood the system, they might develop countermeasures. Swett's name appears nowhere in official histories published before 1990. He was promoted to Chief Petty Officer in January 1944. He served on the Essex until the war ended, maintaining aircraft, training new mechanics, and quietly implementing improvements that saved lives. When other sailors asked him about his role in the fuel tank solution, he deflected credit. "A lot of people figured it out," he'd say. "I just got lucky." After the war, Swett returned to Terre Haute. He opened a small auto repair shop. He married his high school sweetheart, Mary Catherine Sullivan. They raised 4 children. He never talked about his Navy service. His children didn't know about his role in saving hundreds of pilots until a Navy historian tracked him down in 1991. The foam-lined fuel tank principle Swett pioneered is still used today. Modern aircraft, military, and civilian use foam baffles and fuel tanks to prevent explosion during crashes. The Federal Aviation Administration requires foam-based explosion suppression systems in commercial aircraft fuel tanks. Formula One race cars use similar technology. Every time you board an airliner, you're protected by a safety system that traces its roots back to a 24-year-old mechanic who refused to accept that good men had to die. In 1993, the Navy awarded Swett the Legion of Merit, 48 years late. The citation reads, "For exceptionally meritorious conduct in the performance of outstanding services and achievements, whose innovation in fuel system safety directly resulted in the preservation of hundreds of lives and contributed significantly to the success of naval aviation operations in the Pacific Theater." Swett attended the ceremony at the Pentagon. He was 74 years old. When reporters asked him how it felt to finally receive recognition, he said, "I was just doing my job. The real heroes are the pilots who flew those missions. I just made sure they could come home." James Swett died in 2009 at age 90. His obituary in the Terre Haute Tribune mentioned his Navy service in the final paragraph. Most readers had no idea the quiet mechanic who'd fixed their cars for 50 years had saved hundreds of lives. The lesson of James Swett's story isn't about genius or credentials or formal education. It's about seeing problems clearly, having the courage to act, and understanding that sometimes the most important innovations come from people who aren't supposed to have the answers but who refuse to accept that the answers don't exist. Sometimes the person who changes everything is the person nobody expected. Sometimes the solution is simple, and sometimes breaking the rules is the only way to save lives.